Hey folks, welcome to another very well-produced ComicBase live stream. I'm your host, Pete Pickford, and this one is gonna be on. I always say it, but this time I really mean it is going to be on the short side, because honestly, too much stuff is going on, and I have not had time to get my ducks in order as far as being able to present it to you. So I'm going to cover some sketch outlines of the whole thing, and we're just going to have to pick up some of the presentation for another day, because unfortunately, it involves showing a lot of things that I just. It takes time to get the visuals together, and I've been running so fast I have not been able to make that happen. Complicating things somewhat also is I was expecting a arrival of a different soundboard in today. It did not happen. That's coming in tomorrow, and then I get to also worry about why does I can't hear anything or whatever else, and we'll pick this up on another time. But I do want to thank you all for getting here, and we'll get through a little bit, and we'll just reschedule. Anyway, please. Richard Scott says, "Oops, looks like I'm not busy enough to make one." I'm not even sure what that means. We've tripped past the meta-ness on this one so far. I don't even know. But Brian Sue's going to be joining us lately. Snow is apparently coming to Minnesota again. Oh, snow comes, the snow goes. Now it's 50s. So who knows? It's Minnesota. Snow up until May is always a possibility. So I hope everyone's enjoying your weather wherever you're having it. And we'll take it from there. Mike Beams joining us here from Vancouver. Welcome. Rob Weinberg from Toledo, Ohio is in the house. Our long-suffering moderator, Gregory Hecht, is joining us here from South Jersey. I'm hearing lots of rainy and wet from wherever you are. Agent DeCamp is here from northeast Florida. 81 and sunny. Well, God bless Florida. Mike Beam also recommends to anyone who also read the new End of Life Series 1. I ducking loved it. All right, it's End of Life. It's good to get comic recommendations here. Let's see here. Balmy 50 degrees in Green Bay. Brian Price is weighing in, and Chris Brazal is in the house as well. Welcome. All right, so just briefly want to cover a few things with ComicBase, and I'm going to give kind of a sketch of the comic news of the world, and then, like I say, we're just going to have to park some of this for later. So on the ComicBase front, I have been, as they say, heads down on working on some things that, strangely enough, mostly aren't ComicBase related. I've been drafted in. We're finally giving some love to Atomic Avenue, so we're working on the interface between Atomic Avenue and ComicBase at this point, sprightening that up, and you should be seeing some new stuff with Atomic Avenue pretty quickly in the future. We hit a couple of hey, we didn't know this was broken things as far as some of the transfer. For instance, who knew that apparently for a little while now, the list of creator names was not making it for the weekly updates over to the ComicBase side of things. So if you were searching on that, you could get to it from a link from within issues and stuff like that. But if you were just going out to the main thing and looking to search on that, that was not doing well. And we also are getting a little bit more finicky about the form of that we send the transmittal file up to Atomic Avenue from whenever we push our weekly updates. For those who don't understand what the heck I'm even talking about, so ComicBase, obviously, huge database of ComicBase of comic books, magazines, books, newspapers, and so forth. And we both consume and also give information from ComicBase over to a sister site called Atomic Avenue, where people use it to buy and sell comic books. Now, what's really cool about this is we get to get all the sales information, the info that comes from Atomic Avenue. So we see what people are listing their books for, we see what things are actually selling for, and so forth. And this gives us a really good, real price basis for the pricing that's in ComicBase. We do that along with Heritage Auction Galleries and so forth. And so it gives us a way to build our pricing based on real market data, not just what people want to have. So. And the short version, when people ask about well, how do you weigh that, is when people list things as for sale, it's more of a nudge in the direction towards that price. It's like people are casting their votes. You get some weight if you have your books listed for a certain price. You get a lot more weight when a book sells for a given price. It's more of a shove when real sales data comes down on a particular book. But the shove only lasts for 30 days. After that, it drops out of the mix, and then things kind of rebalance, and we kind of roll the entire thing as a rolling average. We price somewhere around 2.1, 2.2 million data points each and every single week, and of late about 3 times per week, in order to get all the latest things that are happening with the world of comic books. So that's pretty cool. The thing that we owe back to Atomic Avenue in order to get all their data is we feed them ComicBase information. So we keep them apprised of all the new books, everything else that's going on with that. So then that becomes something that they can use to make it so people can list their books very easily. And one thing that we were also sending them, which until I realized it has been broken for a couple weeks and it's now no longer broken, is you also can do things like searching through the storylines or searching through creator credits and things like that. And one form of the searching was working just fine, but the big list of comic creators and comic storylines and such that we were updating every week, that part of the transmittal had gone wrong. So I've been fixing that, and you should see that fix, as well as some other Atomic Avenue searching features. We've actually been architecting almost like a site within a site on Atomic Avenue, where the searching on it is being done through what they call an API-based site, written in a much more modern architecture. We have a chance to do development that isn't on Atomic Avenue's critical path. One of the problems you always have when you're writing code is how do you rebuild the house while people are living in it. And one thing that we figured out to do on this thing is we were going to take all the searching code that Atomic Avenue relies on, and which then ComicBase could use as well. And if we build essentially an interface where we can call that from within things, then we could use that to search from any number of things, whether it's Atomic Avenue, the site itself, from the ComicBase app, from a potential future mobile offerings, or anything else like that. And we're building that kind of side by side with the existing structure and everything. And so we can actually build a much more modern version of that whole thing. And then when we're ready to go, we can actually just cut over the existing Atomic Avenue searching to use the new stuff, or we can leave it where it is and just use that for new product offerings or so forth. And so it's actually kind of exciting. It's nice to dip my hand fairly deeply into the architecture of these sorts of things. The web technologies, as you might imagine, have gotten much, much more advanced over the years since we first had a hand in creating Atomic Avenue. And so it's really kind of fun getting back all into this whole thing. So you will see much more of that in the future. I can't discuss too much of it. My deal with them is that I can show you things when they ship, and I can talk about things that I'm doing, but I can't really promise system features for them until they're actually out there for everyone. But expect new things in the near future on that. So that's what I have been up to. So let me see what else is going on. Oh, Eddie Bear is weighing in everything. So anyway, I'm glad the weather's turning around for everyone. I mean, it's been weird out here is all I can say. On the strange infrastructure route over here, we've actually got a new generator coming in to the Franklin location here. The pad for it just arrived today, and we're actually wiring it up so that we can actually run for unlimited periods of time on generator power with all the Atomic Avenue servers and ComicBase servers and such. Even if, as happened a couple of weeks ago, a massive winter storm closes the entire region for several weeks at a time. So that's some infrastructure stuff that's going on in our neck of the woods, and I will be involved in that as well, because it's not like I'm doing anything else. So we got that going on. Does Human Computing own Atomic Avenue? Yes, we do own it now. We have put them together, but we work them under separate management teams. So whereas I am the king of all things ComicBase, and I can pretty much do what I want. Pardon me, I'm just opening up a Orange Crush here. I'm just dying of thirst. I don't get to just do things to Atomic Avenue at will, because there's lots more people who have things to say about it. But Human Computing is the corporate owner of that one. Atomic Avenue was run as a separate corporation, but Human Computing took a controlling interest of it when we relocated out to Franklin back about 10 years ago now. It's been so it goes. But yeah, one thing that's always been weird is that as you guys might know, I get involved with any number of aspects of the businesses. Everything, I got dragged into the mobile thing in a big way this last year. ComicBase has always been like my first love in the whole thing, and you might have seen that it gets most of my attention. But periodically, I get called in to certainly talk about anything where ComicBase talks to Atomic Avenue, but it's been a long time coming, and it really desperately needs at this point. Atomic Avenue needs some heavy lifting done on its basic site architecture, and I've been putting them off for too long, and so it's about time they got some love. Let me see what else is going on about things. All right, so that's what I've been up to on things. Mark, meanwhile, is blazing through his stuff, and you'll be seeing lots of cool things from him as well. We're getting way ahead of schedule on that one. I'm really liking how 2026 is going for us in terms of productivity, all things considered. Anyway, so one thing I did want to talk about, though, I'm going to try to show it, and unfortunately, I can't make the sound happen, and I do apologize for this. It's just we couldn't get it going before showtime, but I'm going to blast this on one of the other screens here, and let's see if I can make this happen. Yes, there used to be a way to make things. How do we do this? There we go. Okay, so if you guys have been paying attention to, I'm just going to talk over this for a little bit. Been paying attention to the internet a bit, you have probably seen this just drop. This happened, I want to say, like 5-6 days ago. A couple of folks out of Germany, calling themselves the Door Brothers. I can only call them filmmakers at this point. Just dropped it. They put on X, and this is the YouTube copy, which I just managed to find. And I created this in one day. By the way, I'm getting some sound in my headphones. Do you guys, just quickly in the chat, are you hearing dialogue at all in the show? No sound. No, yeah, that's not too bad. So what they've done here, and I'm just going to talk over this for a bit. I guess I probably won't get copyright stricken on it, based on music, because you can't hear anything. Um, uh, but what they've done here is purely in AI is they have created a 3.5 minute long. What if you were to shoot this would have been a multi-million dollar action movie. It's like, by multi-million dollar, I mean like a lot, like hundreds of millions. Um, and Greg Heck is pointing at his set piece of saying, okay, Greg, can you hear me now? Okay, that's weird. So Greg, were you getting no sound while I was playing that, but you were hearing me? If so, then we have the weirdest sound thing of them all. Anyway, we'll figure this out when the new board comes in. But just to quickly scrub through some of this one. This is a 3.5 minute film. You can call it nothing else. This thing looks absolutely freaking terrific. It's do check it out. It's called Apex. You can find YouTube. If you're on X, certainly find that. Look for the Door Brothers, DOR brothers, and look through it. And here's where this gets very contentious. I say one thing about it is it's clearly made by people who know how to direct a film, and what actors look like, work like, and so forth. And it actually tracks like a film clip, which makes it different than most of these demos that we've seen, previously. I'll go ahead and take them off of the ground. Kill the green screen. That should put me back on. So there's nothing, in a way, shot for shot, there's nothing we haven't kind of seen before. What we are seeing that's new about this whole thing is you're taking people with filmmaker sensibilities and you're letting them really go to town with things. And it's also one day worth of work. One day. I mean, if you were going to, make the Avengers, or you're going to make, just any mainstream Marvel movie, whoever's involved with it is kissing goodbye to a couple, 3 years of their life. If you're one of the producers or directors or things like that, this is one day of some talented people. The actresses, the voiceovers, everything like that is AI, and it doesn't feel like AI. Now, you can still go shot for shot through the entire thing and kind of pick out, well, this wasn't quite right. Oh yeah, when the police car sideswiped them in the middle of the huge chase sequence, you could see that it doesn't really say police, it says posts. Or you could, one person took, there's a huge, they decided to use a cyber truck, for the whole thing, for the getaway, which was, an interesting choice. And someone was playing, yeah, but you're making car revving noises for the Cybertruck, and they don't sound like that. And honestly, if it was a real filmmaker, they might have made that decision anyway, just because it sounds cooler. But no, there's a number of little futzy things that you can, try to finagle about the whole thing. But I mean, this is the part where I would just, say to, fellow creatives out there, let's be honest. This is amazing stuff. I mean, if you had made this, your friends would all be like, "Dude!" I mean, it's and honestly, the Door Brothers deserve nothing other than people saying, "Dude," because again, it proves it can be done. It really is like, just take some sensibility, some taste, a sense for what action looks like, a sense for what all the stuff should play like in real life. And imagine if you took 2 days on it, or for that matter, what if you took a year, which is what, again, something that was a trillionth of the size of this, would have done. What could you have done with that? And the answer is you could have told whatever story you wanted, and it would have been just fine. So that is one of the most, stunning things that's dropped lately. And of course, if you look at the chats that follow this release on it, up, down, and sideways on X, it's completely split right down the middle. There's people like me who sit there going like, "Dude," and then there's honestly lots and lots of just sniping. People who just say like, "No, that's not so good," because it's like, and they think, "Oh, it's an AI slop. It does this." It's like, and honestly, I'm just going to tell you, you guys, you're full of shit. It's you're talking crap about something that, what I think what's really going on is it's there to eat your lunch, and that's the kind of attitude that I think if you give into that kind of just bitter, I'm not going to recognize this or give it any kind of like the due for what they're doing. I think it's the kind of thing that's going to lock you into a cycle where you're going to spend too much of your time being bitter and not responding when the ground shifted out from under you, and you're going to wind up falling flat and looking ridiculous. I mean, I would definitely suggest everyone who's inclined to go there. And honestly, I feel this way when I talk about AI coding. It's like you spend all your life learning something. Yeah, I guess it's good that I got early exposure to this as a drummer, because the first drum machines came around. I was like, they kind of suck. They can't do half the things that I know how to do. It's like, it didn't mean that they didn't reshape music, and that's the reality of what all these tools are doing. I mean, if you have a friend who spent their entire lifetime becoming a fine graphic artist, I mean, if they're going through stress right now, it's no bloody wonder, because what people are able to do with a concept, it took them a lifetime to learn. And what you're doing just with a concept, it makes look effortless, and it looks like it kind of invalidates everything that they struggled their entire life to do. And so, I mean, I get why people are just tying themselves to knots over the whole thing, and that you have this horrible sinking feeling of ugh. But I'd encourage you to reframe this whole thing a different way, and that is to say, oh my God, the tools are amazing now. Imagine what, I mean, if some guys who don't have half the talent I know how to do of how to create visuals, what could I do if this thing was part of my war chest? It was in my toolbox. I think that's a much more productive place to kind of put your head, even if you don't really feel it at first. I'm going to go just speaking for myself right now. It's Phil Collins was. I was reading Modern Drummer magazine, and if you guys have ever learned how to play an instrument, even one that you don't claim as an instrument, like percussion or drums. The old joke, it's like, what do you call someone who hangs out with musicians? A drummer. It's like, but anyway, the but what's the difference between a drummer and a large pepperoni pizza? Large pepperoni pizza can feed a family of 4. Anyway, but if you've spent your life learning a skill, you've done all the 10,000 hours required to get good at it, or whatever the real number is. When something comes along that's super disruptive, and I can push a button and suddenly that tom room tone that it comes straight off of Steve Gadd being recorded by the highest end microphone that you'll never be able to afford on the nicest board with digital converters and so forth that you'll never be able to do. And so I can just go doom 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 doom, and suddenly I get a more perfect drum sound by tapping 4 or 5 things with my fingers than I could get after like a day of adjusting microphone positions and carefully tuning drum heads and doing all the stuff. Yeah, no, it makes you, it gets under your skin if you let it. And I remember feeling quite put out about this whole thing, and then reading an issue of Modern Drummer, and they were interviewing Phil Collins, who probably made the most iconic drum sound of the entire 80s. If you think about the In the Air Tonight, with the big drum break, it's like the and as well as he basically almost invented the gate effect for snare drums, which was on every recording for about 3 years. It's that one where like every time you hit the drum, it's not just a pow, it's a pow, and it's like it's just this incredibly loud thing that cuts off really abruptly. It's called you attach something called a noise gate to it, and it just wound up having this wonderful effect on 80s drums, which super iconic. Phil Collins was the guy behind all that stuff, and I'm reading this this issue of Modern Drummer, and he said, I think the most liberating thing to me ever, which was like, he's not saying it to me, he's writing in the interview, but he wrote, it's like, yeah, I think you have to be a really good drummer to be a really good drum programmer. And I desperately want that to be true. And I think it mostly is. But it's, if you look at what he wound up doing, is he would use every tool in the arsenal to make recordings. And that, I think, is exactly the right thing to do. Is so if you've got something that you can layer, percussion parts and then play live drums off over the top of them. I was actually in bands where that was exactly the groove that we would do for a while. If you want to mix in whatever the right effect is on the given thing, if you want to use, acoustic drums, synthetic drums, drum machines, whatever the thing is, the things that make interesting noise that make people say, that's cool, that's the thing you want to bring to the party. And it doesn't kind of matter how you get there, because your job at the end of the day is to move the audience. That's the one thing that you really get paid for is, if you're an artist, you've got to do something that makes the audience stand up and say, hey, that's what that guy's doing is pretty cool. Whether you're a visual artist, a graphic artist, or for that matter a programmer, is we get paid based on, did we do something that made us say, wow, that's neat. They don't really care how you got there, and honestly the truth is your audience never really will care how you got there, not in the end. Now at the moment right now, AI is coming along, and it's toasting everybody's biscuits. I mean, it's really, I wish I were more Southern. I'm a recent transplant to the South, so I don't really know all the really good Southernisms on the whole things. But yeah, no, people are really feeling like about the whole thing, because I think we can all feel that it's coming for all of us. My wife is a writer, by trade. I mean, for many years, she earned a paycheck and made a living by writing, taking, complicated, technical things, turning them into prose that people could understand, writing stories, writing specs, writing screenplays, whatever the thing is, she would write them. This takes a lifetime to learn. And suddenly, a couple, 3 years ago, ChatGPT comes out the door, and suddenly it's like, how do I tell that you wrote this as opposed to someone else? And the answer was, I can't necessarily reliably do it. I mean, we can all kind of invent what we think the tells are, and there's all sorts of people, and you can tell how defensive everyone gets about the whole thing. It's like, I can always tell AI writing. It's like, can you now? Because when people would go and take, AI written story samples, essentially anonymize them, so it becomes unknown who wrote what, typeset them all in the same thing, and so forth. Get rid of all the usual tells, that would give it away just by provenance. But when people were actually asked to weigh short stories, and some were written by AI, some were written by quite successful authors, by about a 6 to, what was it, like a 3-2 margin. They preferred the AI written ones to the ones written by actual human authors when they didn't know who did it. Now, the second you said, "Oh, this one's by AI," they were like, "Oh, that thing's a piece of crap. I could tell that a mile away. That thing's absolute garbage." And the truth is, you can't really, but we're all still on Team Human, so we're still voting for the human right now. But at the same time, anyone who's involved in the production of art is quietly using AI to get a technical, a competitive advantage against all their peers. And that's what's really going on right now. We talked about this at some length in a previous podcast, where some AI artists had come along, and basically it was someone who just uses AI in her art. I'm not sure even to what extent, had gotten drummed out of a comic convention. Someone had essentially finked on her. You've got an entire artist alley filled with people who are essentially ripping off trademarked properties of Star Wars and Spider-Man, things like that. They're just drawing their own versions and selling those. And someone had finked on this person because they said, "Oh yeah, I use AI in my artwork." And they said, "How dare you?" And they organized an insta protest on her at the time, and got security to escort her out of the place, and have them belatedly clarify that, well, in the fine print that we said somewhere, we said that you can't claim that something is AI based art thingy, whatever. It was incredibly murky at the time. And it was also, let's face it, being incredibly selectively enforced. Yes, we're going to see a lot of this kind of stuff, just like we see in the Twitter thread handles around the Door Brothers piece. I stand up for real human art, blah, blah, blah. I mean, yes, it feels very justified, to rage against it. And I'm just going to say it's a bad long-term move, because if you're in a position where every single person who's in the marketplace other than you has the incentive to use every tool at their disposal to stand out, you're not going to hold a principled position successfully of saying, "Well, I won't use that in my work." You'll get the absolute, golf clap, respect of all your peers for a while in the whole thing. Well, they very quietly use the stuff to lap you all the time. And if you don't watch it, you're going to be limited to PBS fund drives and things like that in order to support your work. It's not a winning strategy for art. It never has been. It's just, don't do it. I would strongly advise you against it. I get it feels super, super justified right now, but I think it has in history pretty much a 100% record of failing when there's a superior tool that enters into the fray. The people who say, "No, I won't adopt the tool in my art based on principled grounds," always, and I mean always, get shivved by the people who do use it and then do something cool with it. Be the guy who does something cool with it. Don't be the guy who sits there and say, "I'm never going to do that because I'm better than that." It's not a good position. It feels very ennobling at the moment, and it ultimately is going to make you a bitter person. So just, I'm going to say, don't. Luddites. Was it Ned Ludd, who's a semi-real, semi-apocryphal figure from England. I get the impulse, and I've never seen so many people being so threatened on so many fronts all at once. I mean, the Industrial Revolution took a while to ramp up. From the very first time that we invented the steam engine. By the way, I don't know if I covered this before. Steam engine, you guys might remember, it's that all the other things that we use to measure units of force, of energy, of work, things like that, almost all of them are very lovely scientific measurements named after either some measurable quantity, like the fluctuation of the hydrogen atom at a certain temperature, multiplied by some impossible number, or it's the exact wavelength of red light at a certain thing, or it's named after the inventor themselves. The watt, for instance, is a unit of electricity. The Kelvin. Whoever the great scientist of the field was at the time. We have a measure called horsepower, which is fantastic because it's a marketing term. it's basically when they, and I'm now going to completely blank on the inventor of the steam engine. wasn't James Watt. Anyway, but anyway, when the steam engine was being introduced as a replacement for manual labor, it was there to make a gear go round, to before it ever got mounted onto a plow, before it ever got done everything else. It could drive looms, it could drive steamships, it could drive it could do things like that. But when it first started out, it's like the inventor is sitting there going, well, I have to sell these things. What do I do? I've invented one that, it's great. It does the job. It keeps going 24/7. And he finally hit upon a magical thing, which is, okay, what I'll do is I'll describe how powerful mine is in terms of how many horses you don't need to do the same job. And that's how we invented this very idiosyncratic measurement we have. As far as I know, it's just about alone in the world of scientific measurements of anything, the horsepower. And if you look at a horsepower, it doesn't measure the pull of a horse, as far as how, a horse, one horse pulls about 3 times what a 1 horsepower engine can pull. But that's still about the right measurement, because what it really is, it's a measurement of how many horses you don't need to buy if you buy my engine, because the horse gets tired after a while. The horse, the steam engine can go 24 hours a day. You have to put the horses into the barn and let them rest after a while, let them feed and let them water. And so, one of my things that can pull as much as a horse is about a 3 horsepower engine. So it's just, it's fabulous. But it's basically a marketing term. Anyway, so let's see. Steam engine was not invented by Wapasimi, perfected by him. Yeah, I'm just blanking on the exact inventor that I'm thinking of, but thank you, Mike Beam, on that one. Yeah, so when it comes down to the tools of these things, we've got a bundle on our hands. But the thing I want to say is, I think the reason the AI is coming out and it's being so shocking to us all at once is it took decades between the very first time you had a steam engine that didn't blow up in your faces and when suddenly you had these things, replacing all the, cloth making in England, and having, people talk about the infernal factories and things like that, which ironically were still better than running the farms. And if you see how a modern farm works and what a single farmer or a single small number of people can do, powered by modern plows and things like that, compare that to the teams of really grueling, backbreaking, destroy your body work that real farming used to be before those came along. It's absolutely mind-blowing. But we had hundreds of years to adjust to the idea of that on farms. We had dozens of years to adjust to it in the terms of the Industrial Revolution. We've had like 2 or 3 years tops for the people who are first being impacted by AI to get used to the idea that, like, I may never get another tech writing job again. That may not even be a field anymore. I mean, everyone I knew who was a writer who knew how to explain or understand technical concepts and put them into clear focus, the money job in that entire field was tech writing. I mean, it was a great field. I don't know that it even exists in a meaningful sense today. I'm saying that with all honesty. I don't know any of my old friends who were tech writers who still earns their living that way. I don't see people offering assignments that way anymore. I think when you want something like that described, I think these days you ask ChatGPT, and when you get it back, you kind of go, that sounds pretty good. You don't care if it's the most undying prose you've ever seen. It's not going to go through 7 editorial drafts before it gets printed into a volume and consumed. No, it's going to get shoved up on the website that afternoon. You're done with it. That sort of thing is happening across such a broad space of activity right now that it's absolutely shocking. And it does, it makes you feel like, yes, if you could rise up and smash the looms and do a Luddite revolt on the whole thing, I think you'd get a lot of people who'd want to sign up with you. But it's coming for everyone, and it's coming for everyone all at once. So I think right now about the only person who's feeling really, really, really good about his life in terms of like job security is your plumber, your electrician, and the guy who works on your car. But other than that, I think everyone else is getting a little scared, and I think they've got some right to. I'm looking at, I want to talk about another thing that's happened just in the last it had happened technically over the last 4 months, but really it's happened in 3 weeks, which is a thing called OpenClaw. I don't know if you guys have heard about this yet. If you unless you really obsessively follow, tech news, you'd probably be like, "A what? Open what?" Because it's a 3-week-old story for all practical purposes. There's a guy, I believe his first name is Peter. I keep on thinking of the comic guy, Snedgeberg, which is not him. It's someone who could look it up. The author of OpenClaw. I did not have a chance to jot it down beforehand. An Australian dude had made his money back in 2014. He had decided to help out a buddy who was having trouble, I think, on his iPad. He thought, well, there should be a PDF viewer on an iPad, and of course, Apple, being Apple at the time, disagreed. So he said, "Well, what I'll do is I'll put together an iPad viewer, for the whole thing." And he has this weird, slippery Austrian accent, which I can't quite mimic with great finesse. So I'm just going to let it go for now. I won't do the impression. But this became a kit which got rolled into software for other things. Just like we went to incredible lengths to get a barcode recognizers kit for the new ComicBase that would reliably read the supplementals on periodicals. You can make huge amounts of money in software, as it turns out, if you're one of the earliest guys to put out a widely accessible kit, which other people can use to read PDF files. And that's what he did. I believe he had something like 1 billion downloads for the kit that he did to make PDFs. And when he sold his company off, I want to say about 3.5 years ago, he had a 9-figure exit from the whole thing. So he made his bucks, and he made it at a very young age. He spent the next couple of years, I think I had to look up the drug that he experimented with as part of a mind experiment thing. I think he went to Marrakesh. He traveled the world. He went into therapy. He did all the things you would do if you'd made 9 figures and still wanted to know what to do with your life. And then he came back home and was playing with large language models. And after someone said something like 44 different projects that he kind of picked up, tried it for a bit, went on. He came up with the idea of what I'd really like. I wish I had a secretary. I don't have, I sold my company. I don't have a secretary anymore. But, if I want to get to with my friends and, have a WhatsApp chat, say, hey, do you want to go maybe to, do this thing tonight? Is it cool for you? And check in with everyone and make sure that, that happens. I wonder if I could essentially vibe code myself something which I could just write, pretend that, I'm using Claude code, and what if I just spun up something that's like a little personality for my assistant? I'll just describe what I want them to, think of themselves as, and they will just run all the time in the background. Wow, people really want to talk today, but I cannot talk to you now, so I'm just going to turn off the phone. Anyway, but he had thought, well, okay, what if I just spun up this whole thing and, I'll give it command lines and Wowwy Wowwy Wow. Okay. Hey, here's an idea for a really great app, something that makes it easier to turn off Motorola phones. While you're not looking at them, because I think there's about 5 buttons you have to press at the same time and hold them down. There we go. That's emergency, that's unknown, and that is power off. There we go. Okay, cool. But what he had done is he said, well, what if I vibe coded this thing so I could more or less say, okay, I want you to be the guy who checks my schedule and you confirm my appointments with people who are asking about them, and maybe checks in with friends if we need to get some buy-in on other things like that. And hey, I could actually spin up a second assistant who does other things. Maybe he checks my email and says, are there any important issues that I'm not responding to in time, and gets back and gives basic responses. But if they don't like the basic response, that they could escalate up to me. And I could make a third one which kind of checks in my code commits on the whole thing, and I'll get a fourth one which manages the other 3. And you spin up these things called agents, and they all communicate using any number of open source, not necessarily open source tools, but he basically left the architecture wide open about what they would use. Could they use Claude's interfaces? Could they use, OpenAI's interfaces and so forth? And he just left it completely open. But he said, what I'll do is I'll bundle all this stuff together. I'll make the glue for the whole thing. And he liked the name Claude because he was using Claude, Anthropic's Claude code. He called this thing Claude Bot. Sure, yeah. And he spun this up, I want to say, sometime around last April was when he first stumbled upon the whole idea of the thing. I think he committed in sometime around November. And about 3 weeks later, he gets a note from Anthropic's legal team saying, you've got like 2,000 people who've downloaded your thing here, which you're calling Claudebot, and that is our trademark. So, mofo, you have to change this now. And so they thought, okay, well, I've got a domain. I guess when you shed your skin, because he likes lobsters. I guess he'd see an episode of Doctor Who with a lobster guy, and he liked the idea of like, this is the logo and stuff. And so what he'd done is he said, okay, what I'll do is I'll call it Moltbot. See, because a lobster sheds the skin, you molt, right? And I've got the domain for that. But then he changed the name of his top end NuGet pack, or not NPM package, and there were other bots watching him do this. And in the minute or so it took him to change the name of the thing to Moltbot, someone else had gone in there, grabbed. They saw him do part of the change. They went and grabbed the other end of where he was going on the whole thing, and started, using the domain to slam like fake cryptocurrency. And this happened like 2 times in a row, and they were all within a minute of each other as he's trying to change names on the whole thing. I think he wound up changing the name something like 4 or 5 times, and eventually he wound up calling it, I believe, Open Claw with the, CLAWED, and that's the name that stuck on the whole thing. Now, when this was all going on, and this was happening like over Christmas, right? This is like 2 months old, this story, right? In the whole thing. When it was briefly Moltbot, some people were getting a hold of your very early adopters were getting a hold of the whole thing. And so, well, hey, I'll take this thing, I'll install it on my Mac Mini, I will spin up my own agents, and hey, one thing, hey, wouldn't this be funny? Why don't we set up a social media account? Because the way that these things communicate with you is they post Slack messages or WhatsApp messages or whatever else, and it's kind of like your little robot programming team or your management team is actually filing status reports to you all day long and reading your responses back to them, and that's how you kind of keep the whole thing in sync. So everyone's got their own little robot army going, on these things, hosted off of their local Mac Mini if they want. Well, some people thought, well, this would be funny. What if these guys, because they're posting messages all day, well, what if we gave them social media? Because, they have to have a name to post to Twitter, post to Slack. What if we let them have discussion boards where the bots could talk to other bots about bot things? What would they do? And this became a weird story because it turns out that if bots are talking to other bots about bot things, they talk about cryptocurrency and about religions and all sorts of crazy things like that. And this started getting a lot of coverage in the news. And so then more people started downloading the GitHub repository and said, I got to see what this Moltbot thing is. This is insane. We are living in a weird transhuman thing. Well, fast forward now, he's finally found something that gets Anthropic off of his case, and they were very nice to him. They said, yeah, we'll give you all 2 days before we send all the lawyers after you. And that's why he's going out of his mind. And he's at heart, he's just like a 30-year-old coder, who's like still wearing his band T-shirts and stuff like that. And he's trying, to do the right thing. He wants everyone to have peace, love, and understanding, and good PostScript, libraries for their applications. And he's just thinking, hey, I just wanted the secretary. What do you want, man? And he's doing all this stuff and putting his products out for free. People are grabbing the names as fast as he can, making them, pitching crypto scans, grabbing the ends of whatever he's trying to do, and making his life a living, hell. And he's got, the lawyers from one of the biggest companies on the planet are threatening to come down on like a ton of bricks in 2 days. He eventually comes up with Open Clawed, and they get off his case. And then immediately right after that, he starts getting calls from Mark Zuckerberg and the dude over at OpenAI, and they say things like, "Hey man, would you like to join us?" And so he's shopping around those offers because they want to bring him on board. Because in the midst of all this, someone has noticed that the number of GitHub commits, or not commits, but of pulls of the software that he's been designing, this Open Cloud thing, have suddenly hit 160,000 in the space of a couple of days. It's the most jumped on project in the history of the site, and I believe it's close to. I want to say it's like close to 200,000 today. I could be off by like Peter Steinberg. By the way, is the name of the guy. Um, but it's absolutely insane how adopted this thing has gotten. It's gotten to the point where because it's most easily hosted on something like a Mac Mini, Apple is sold out of Mac Minis for the next, months or so of the high memory spec ones because people are all using this thing to fire up their own little agent armies. So this is all going on, and this is quite fascinating. It was just announced, I believe, earlier today. Might have been Valentine's Day. Like I say, the days are running fast these days. That OpenAI had just acquired him as an employee. He turned down Mark Zuckerberg, which apparently Mark had impressed him very favorably because when he called Mark Zuckerberg, Mark's like, "Yeah, hey man, I want to talk to you, but I just want to finish this code first," because he was working on something, and Peter Steinberger was thinking, "Oh, hey, Zuckerberg, he's all right." But apparently, the idea that OpenAI would come in there and throw essentially infinite compute resources at this thing is what turned it over on the whole thing. So, yeah, absolutely insane story of what's been going on the whole thing. It's absolutely insane what's happening with people spinning up their own little robot armies, the amount of token usage that's going on. Token is like the currency. Think of it as like the fuel gauge of when your AI is running off doing things for you. It was announced, Anthropic, that I believe 90% of their latest code model, which of Claude Code, was designed by Claude Code. So yes, the robots are writing themselves. Open Claude agents have the ability to rewrite their own source code. That's a thing that happens. They have the ability when they're running on. The reason you want to run them on a separate box is because depending on how you configure the file system permissions on it, they have access to everything on that box, depending on what you do. So, you probably want to isolate them from the rest of your stuff. There have been absolutely epic security, you know, I'd call them failures, except if you didn't try to secure it, does it count? But the potential for security exploiting and things like that that goes along with the idea of all these things having absolute access to people's machines and lives and calendars and histories and things like that, as you can imagine, absolutely spectacularly off the charts. I want to see something like 20 bots working in conjunction, just left on their own. They'd have one or two of the bots were used as managers for the other bots, and they said, "Yeah, here's the specs. We want you to write a C compiler," which is, you guys could guess, is a really really non-trivial bit of engineering. And it gave them the specs. And is it the world's best C compiler? No, it is not. There are much faster ones that we have spent decades writing, but this thing put the thing together in I think they wanted to say it cost them like $20,000 worth of credits, and it did it in a couple of weeks. It's insane how quick this stuff is moving, and it's not slowing down. There's a term for what's going on right now, vibe coding, right? It's like anything else new on the scene. Um, and I guess I'll back it up to the very first demo of Steve Jobs is bringing, he's bringing the Mac around as a birthday present to like a nephew or something, and he wants to show it off. And of course, he arranges that all sorts of luminaries are at the party, including Andy Warhol. And there's a very funny bit where Andy Warhol, famous, the father of op art, and so forth, is sitting there and he's drawing a circle using the mouse, which is, as you know, if you use a graphic interface, you just kind of grab the mouse, grab the circle tool, go bzzoop, and it makes a perfect circle. Well, once upon a time, the idea that you could draw a freehand circle like this was the sign of the greatest of all artists. This is something that, as the tools are just pounding out there, it's blowing everyone's minds. Well, same thing is going on with all the new stuff. I guess I'll move off the point because I've covered some of this before, but it's absolutely earth-shaking how quickly it's going and how quickly it's going to go. The current state of the art, the way we put down people who are working with us right now, like real programmers like myself, again, decades and decades, since I wrote my first professional program, the one like that people paid me money for, was written on a TI 99 4A, if you guys can imagine that one. And I believe I was 12. I basically would earn things through, like, high school, writing computer programs back in the early 80s for, like, schools and things. That's my study. So I mean, I've been doing this stuff forever, and I was kind of joking, not joking, a year ago when I said, "Yeah, I'm using the new coding tools for the whole thing," and now suddenly I'm the third best programmer at ComicBase, and not just the second. It's insane how good the tools are right now, to the point where they literally, in many cases, exceed your ability. Well, one of the things that the people who are kind of feeling put out and butthurt about the whole phenomenon when something scoops your thing is you say, well, you're a poser, you're a pretender, you're not a real coder, you're a vibe coder. Vibe coder is a new thing that's entered the lexicon, which is what real programmers like myself, who spent all the hours in the trenches learning this stuff, will say about someone who just kind of says, well, look, I don't actually know any of the syntax or any of the rules of the computer languagey thing so much, but I want a program which does this. And you describe what you want the thing to do in enough detail, breaking the problem down to enough steps where you can just hand it over to the AI, and the AI more and more can just make the program for you. Now, you can't just say things like, hey, make me a comic book database programmer. That isn't going to get you there yet. Because it turns out that there's a lot more to the problem than just saying, I want a comic-based database. So I mean, there's a hell of a lot to specify when it comes down to the nitty-gritty of it. But more and more, it is possible for people to go and say, look, and again, I do this now as part of my regular life, is I'll sit there and say, okay, here's the routine we're using to, read and post things for this type of issue table up to this other system on the whole thing. I need this sort of data transformed in such and such a way. I need to make sure that we check for this. And, I want you to evaluate what I've given you here and suggest improvements for the whole thing and take it off from there. That is like level one of use of AI in the workforce. It's like I realize you're a useful tool, you can make things faster, but I don't really trust you, and I'm going to check over everything you do. That's kind of where most programmers kind of live today. More and more, however, and junior programmer positions are dropping off job boards like you can't believe. I believe I saw notes saying something like 60% drop off of junior programmer roles, which used to be the people who were given like the really thankless stuff to do. Hey, we need, our customers need a report which does blah, blah, blah. Can you, sweat around for 3 days and make this, godless, piece of code that, does that whole thing? You don't hire a junior programmer for that anymore. Now you just give that as instructions to Claude Code or your LLM, and it kicks up the whole thing to you in half an hour or 20 minutes or even 5 minutes, and you just don't hire the other guy, which also means that there's not another guy who learns through the ranks what all the low-level things are and builds up his knowledge of the code base. No, that part of the ladder is kind of getting chopped off with great speed, and so things are moving up from there. But it proceeds up from that, where you can extract the tasks higher and higher. I could have, instead of going into the exact specifications of how when you're loading up a table from ComicBase into Atomic Avenue, how the release date on books is equivalent to the cover date on other thing, or the street date on other things, or I'm sorry, the cover date on other types of media, and how do we want to square that circle, or how do we handle the binding types, or all this minutia that goes into the whole thing. You could, to a great extent, on many sorts of problems, simply say things like, yeah, I need something which does something like this, and have it write all the code for you. And just it'll come back with something that probably compiles, and it might, again, increasingly get the job done. And there are actually some very serious companies now, which I want to say strong type, strong something, that they're literally making a rule in their own development teams that, yeah, no, humans don't write the code. Humans don't even read the code. Humans are there to verify that the functions that were done with the code are correctly established, but we're not going to get into the mess of how it got there because we don't need to. The computer execution speed is fast enough. We don't need to worry about optimizing it to a great extent. And let's face it, the code that comes out of the stuff oftentimes is very optimal, just as far as that goes, because I found out that they have access and they know about techniques that most humans wouldn't even bother trying to do. Now, is it secure? Are there security problems, things like that? The answer so far with testing is hell no. But in a way, those are almost like implementation details. Again, if you don't mind the nukes flying and so forth. But yeah, more and more, we're actually starting to see the establishment of businesses where the humans neither write nor read the code, and so they refer to this now. It's the opposite of vibe coding, and they call it the dark factory. It's sort of like we're responsible for making sure that our customers' needs are met. We have the systems there, but we have armies of robots who design the actual guts of the system. We just make sure that we've connected with the customer enough so that they get what they want. And that's being pursued at breakneck speed by folks who frankly probably don't have anything to lose. I'm sure they have funding behind them in order to afford the incredible compute costs and the amount of army of tokens that are required to generate businesses like this. But people can afford to throw money at these sort of moonshot things. I think we are going to see some absolutely spectacular failures. I think, just the equivalent of when we saw in the early days of AI video, you saw people with 6 fingers or gymnasts who, when they do a backflip, suddenly their feet and their heads swap positions and such. We will see the equivalent of things like this, happening more and more in like the real world that real people can really see. And to the extent that we allow AI to do things like driving cars and things like that, I imagine people are going to die. And I also imagine that it's going to absolutely revolutionize industries. And 10 years from now, things that scare the living hell out of us, we won't think about twice. So that's kind of where I see the state of the art as it is right now. If you'd asked me 1 year ago, would I ever set foot in a Waymo taxi, which is to say that I dial on my phone, I order up a taxi from the airport, and I get in and there's no driver. I open the door, there's nobody there, there's not even a steering wheel, right? And I just say, yeah, I'm going to this hotel. Would I get in, shut the door, and trust my life to the idea that this autonomous moving missile is going to get me to my hotel without bashing into every other thing on the road? A year ago, the answer would have been hell no. Not just no, hell no. And nowadays, in more and more cities around the country, that is exactly how people get around where they're going, and they don't think twice about it. There are trains that you will get onto these days, a public transport, where if you actually look forward into the engineering compartment, the engineer, to the extent that there is one, is basically playing on his laptop the entire time. He's just there for window dressing and union rules. He does not actually drive the train in any meaningful way. That's on a track, on a closed system. You'd think that that'd be an easier job, and it is. But if you look at robo-taxis and things like that, that is increasingly the way that the actual world works. And the thing that's very compelling about it is you're sitting there saying, you got to be crazy. Why would I risk my life at this whole thing? It turns out that the overall rates of crashing are a fraction of that of human drivers. It turns out they're actually cheaper to insure. The industry insurance guys, they know this very much because they're just counting crashes and liabilities. And it turns out that you can insure a Waymo for about a third of the price you would insure a regular car for. Because the rate of crashes is that much less severe, and when they do, they happen at a lower speed. So that's a thing. That's interesting. But the thing that I think really gets people in the end is I saw there was a guy who was talking about, like, yeah, I picked up a Waymo at some airport, and the price I was being quoted on Uber for regular human driver was like $56, and the Waymo taxi was like $7. And it's like, oh yeah, faced with that same decision day after day after day, a lot of people are going to take the $7 one. So anyway, that's a thing. So That's a bit. We will talk more about this in the future. I will have demos to show on the stuff. I do want to get to some of the comments on the other hand. Ed had a question. Can you please clarify the difference between submit new or corrected data and submit all corrections? So this is referring to a feature in ComicBase, which if you are one of the top submitters in ComicBase, yeah, I think you have to be in the top 200 folks that have ever submitted stuff to us to get this feature unlocked for you. But if you have this, then when you submit, you see there's a new menu command appears for you. And what if you say submit all corrections, what that does is it allows you to say submit everything that's new in my database since the last time I submitted corrections. So instead of having to make a change, submit it, make a change, submit it, make a change, submit it, you can actually just say make all the changes and then send it all at once. And so anyway, that's what that is. Let me see here. Thomas Newcomen is apparently the name of the guy who did the original invention of the steam engine, if I'm reading this right, from Greg Hecht. Let's see here. Some talks about Lobsters United. Oh yes, PSAs. Do not forget to read those. Absolutely, thank you very much. Yes, because I demand this week's PSAs, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. If this is the sort of thing you like, this is the sort of thing we do. And thank you everyone who showed up on this one. Yes, we do these every week, and it's fun. We have a ComicBase message board over at forums.comicbase.com, which answers not only your ComicBase questions, but also lets you submit questions for the live stream, and we will address those as much as we can. And we also have a dedicated, and don't forget to Atomic Envy, the ComicBase powered venue for buying and selling comics, books, and magazines, to be better as we go. Let's see. Yes, ComicBase TV. If this is a really short episode, I wonder how much longer a long episode would be. Yeah, I'm sorry, Steve. I guess I had a lot in my mind. Oravia says, what happens when no humans understand any of the underlying code? We're almost there, it seems. Yeah, it's I don't know. So one of the things I thought about, and I guess we'll talk about this when we talk about the topics on a grander scale, is I think almost no one's up for all this. I mean, in other words, I think we're all going to use it. I don't think we have a choice but to use it. I think anyone who thinks that you can, again, smash the looms, strike back at the robots and stop the whole thing, I think they're kidding themselves. Because if you do it, even in your place, if you get legislators to pass laws, if you do whatever the thing, it isn't going to stop the competition. They're going to do it. They're going to compete with you just as hard because everyone's looking for any tool they possibly can to have an edge. And no one is more desperate than an individual scrappy guy with nothing to lose. Which is why, again, you saw the Door Brothers, which I assume is no more than 2 or 3 of them at most, created what looks like $100 million movie sequence in a day with available tools, and probably cost them next to nothing in terms of available compute, on the whole thing. I mean, if they spent $5,000 in tokens making that, I'd be amazed. So, yeah, I mean, if anyone knows more about that particular effort, let me know. But that's the start of what we are seeing here. Imagine what the world will look like when, this will absolutely happen. It'll happen within 6 months. I mean, and I'm not saying that oh yeah, 6 months, everything's better. No, I'm like, no, I bet significant amounts of money, 6 months, that you will be seeing major webisodes, major podcasts, major things that people actually tune in for and really look forward to seeing will have been made using AI for the vast, if not 100% of the actual thing that you see on the screen. I think it's going to matter a hell of a lot whether you can tell a good story. But we were having a discussion in the chat the other day. Someone had mentioned this, and I said, well, yeah, I mean, imagine what it will look like. Marvel has, Disney has already licensed to, I believe, OpenAI, hundreds of their characters for use in video creation on their platform. Now, I imagine there's things that involve monetization, that involve taste. You don't want to be showing porno films with Mickey and Minnie. Well, I'm sure some people do. I mean, there were actually comic artists who did things like that. But no, as far as Disney's interest in the whole thing, I'm sure that they want to control the overall look of what goes out there and everything, and probably will have a very heavy hand in that. But think about people who had nothing to lose. I mean, that's the guy you've got to watch out for. Charlton Comics sold off the old characters that became the Watchmen. They were scooped up in a corporate acquisition ages ago, and Alan Moore said, "Hey, yeah, I know what to do with these guys," and he took characters that no one had ever given a crap about. I mean, they couldn't sell in their heyday back in the 50s, in the early 60s, but he took things like the Question, a guy who has a squiggly face that becomes different things. That became Rorschach of the Watchmen, and he says, I could take this and I could make a really, really interesting story. How many properties do we have like that? They're just floating around. That if you took somebody who just had an idea and a really strong opinion for what you could do with it, how many really amazing stories could you tell? If you guys ever saw the show Gotham, what was on the WB originally, what was Gotham other than taking Jim Gordon, I forget the corrupt cop, but a couple of bit players from the Batman universe and a couple people who weren't even dressed up as the villains, like the person they had as Penguin was basically just a nebbish with a bad foot, but it's people that fans would know, have some weight of history about them, but the character by themselves couldn't sell a damn thing. But you took something like that, said, hey, I've got an idea. What if we told a hard-hitting crime drama about this whole thing set in the city of Gotham, but told from like a police perspective where all the stuff is hanging in there, but we almost don't even have the character of Batman in the show. He exists only, again, in the most nascent possible form. You saw more of Alfred the Butler than you saw of Bruce Wayne. So that was 3 or 4 seasons of a fairly major show. What could you do with absolutely incidental characters in the comic universe? Or just think about all the indie comic books out there. Ed Brubaker's Criminal just got picked up as a WB series. But take anything you're seeing like that and just say, hey, I've got a really great idea for a show involving nothing but the supporting characters of Spider-Man. Yes, the thing can absolutely go out there. And I virtually guarantee within 6 months, there will be something that we're all talking about that was made by some impassioned fan that just really cared in a way that the corporate masters over at Marvel and Disney just don't seem to anymore. Because, I mean, if you see fans with a real passion for a property, there's some great stuff that some of them, not all by a long shot, not even 10%. But if you take the top 5% of guys with the ability to tell a story with a passion for the property and turn them loose on these things, man, we're going to see some amazing stuff, and we won't be able to believe that we ever did stuff another way. So that's my prediction. We're going to cut it short there, I think. Noah Cutler says, I've been in a Waymo. It was great. I'd do it again. I set the preference to pick Waymo over a driver. Wow, that's amazing, Noah. Oro says 44,000 people died in car crashes last year, all driven by humans. No, one number says the thing, 1 fatality by Waymo and all hell breaks loose. Yeah, because it's what you're used to. I mean, there's the things that we know to be scared by, and then there's the things that statistically are going to do us in. I guarantee the thing that you're probably most scared of in your life probably is not the thing most statistically there to do, to kill you. But anyway, yeah, and he says also cheaper because you don't have to tip the Waymo. Yeah, and you also don't need to have to pay a human driver. So that's a thing. All right, let's see here. Next week we can talk about comics dev AI. That's a thing that could happen. Who knows? All right, so I think that will do it. Yeah, for all intents and purposes, AI is already out of control. Yeah, and what's to control? I mean, there's no boundary, no force on Earth can control any significant portion of it. I mean, even if you banned its use in all of Western Europe, how do you stop China, Korea, India? How do you stop some scrappy kid who, again, with nothing to lose, who honestly, he's got nothing anyway, and he's got all the time and ambition in the world? How are you going to stop him from doing it? You can host these models on your home computers. You can't control servers on the whole thing. There's no stopping this. So at this point, it's just a question of like, all right, so what are we going to do to limit it? When personal computers first came out, IT departments were an absolute apoplexy. There was people talking. There was a whole term when I first joined Apple. There was a whole term amongst the IT staff, because we were always frustrated at Apple. We could never really get into the corporation the way we wanted to. but people were bringing their computers in from home and doing their work there, which made the IT guys nuts. And they were really, frustrated. But eventually, if the VP of marketing is going to bring in a Macintosh, you can tell the IT guys like, hey man, I need this for my work, wired into the damn network. After enough hemming and hawing, that thing's getting wired into the network. You're going to wind up using it. And it turns out, you could build your own networks if you don't have them wiring. You don't need any cooperation from anyone on half of this stuff. So anyway, yeah, it's coming, but it's fun. I would say go out there and have fun with it. It's an exciting time to be alive. It's absolutely terrifying. And it's only been a year for the coding side of things where it's been good. It's been 6 months when it's been really good. It's been 3 or 4 months when it's been terrifyingly good. And it's amazing how fast everything is moving. So, all right, guys, have fun, and we will talk later. Bye-bye.